But there's another unity. Sukkot has another unity. And the second unity of Sukkot is the Sukkah itself. But the unity of the Sukkah is the opposite of the unity of the Lulav. Because what is a Sukkah? You take a bunch of people and you put them inside one mitzvah. When does a human being ever fully surround himself with a mitzvah? What do we do in our lives where you'll say, from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet are surrounded by a mitzvah? The only example, besides for Sukkah, is mikveh. That's the whole concept of mikveh. You're completely enveloped in a body of water that purifies. If one hair is outside of the water, it's no good. You have to be completely immersed in the mikveh. But you go alone to the mikveh. Everybody's their own water, you understand? Pardon me? A chuppah is a great example. But a chuppah is really more a custom than it is a law. A chuppah is a radiation of this. It's a symptom. Point well taken. It's a very, very good observation. A very legitimate observation. But sukkah. The Talmud says, what's the maximum size of a sukkah? How big can you make a sukkah? If you make it bigger than that, it's not a sukkah anymore. So there's a maximum height. The sukkah cannot be above, 32 or 33 feet. If it's above, pardon me? Under 30 feet, circa, approximately. And the reason for that is because when it's that tall, you won't notice that what's on top of you leaks. It's not a real ceiling. But the length and the breadth, the Talmud says you can put every single Jew in the world in one sukkah. There's no maximum. A sukkah doesn't have a maximum size. You can make a sukkah over all of New Jersey. One building with one set of walls and schach, and everybody shares. And in the sukkah, we're all together. But the sukkah is different than the lulav because the idea of the sukkah is that we're all the same. We're in the same mitzvah. In the four kinds, in the lulav and in the esrog and the hadas and the arava, we have to be different. We must be distinct. And we have to bring to the table our piece. And if you think you can live without your neighbor because you don't like his nose, you have no idea how impoverished you are because you turned your back on your neighbor. We all need each other. And that's the unity of the lulav. So in the lulav, there's an emphasis on difference, on interdependence that's based on diversity. Sukkah is a different concept. We're unified because our differences melt away. What separates us is not of issue. What binds us is what we share, what we have in common is the sukkah. So the sukkah is a different kind of unity than the unity of the lulav. So, as a social scientist, as a person who thinks, so which is a greater unity, the unity of the lulav or the unity of the sukkah? I would say, and I would imagine you agree with me, that the lulav is more sophisticated. The sukkah is very simple. Pardon me?
The other way around.
Okay, I said one thing and say the other things. Now we know that we're Jews. Okay, give me your reasoning.
Because even as an individual, you could contain, a lot of good things. Unless we can put ourselves together and, get along, then...
Right, but there's two concepts of getting along. One concept of getting along is that we each contribute something different. Another concept of getting along is that we're all the same. The lulav represents that we contribute different things, and that's the basis for the unity. The sukkah represents that we find a point in ourselves where there's no difference between one and the next. We share this mitzvah. God gave us a commandment to sit in a hut in weather which is not so agreeable perhaps, and we share the mitzvah and we de-emphasize. We don't underscore the difference. We emphasize we're the same. We're all one because of the mitzvah, and our contribution is equal.
Do we actually know the differences, or we all celebrate the mitzvah of being together, but being very different from each other?
Fair enough. So I think that's a good way to answer the question, right? It depends. If you go into the sukkah and you forget that you're a lulav or an esrog or a hadas and a hadas and an arava, then maybe the sukkah is not such a good idea. But if you remember your unique contribution, and at the same time you get past that, and you find what makes us all equal, then perhaps the unity of the sukkah is greater. In Hasidic philosophy, the way you would answer that question is you would say this: the sukkah is a higher unity, the lulav is a deeper unity. One of the most beautiful ideas that we have in Kabbalah is that we shake the lulav in the sukkah. Why? It's a long story, but the point is, our custom is that you shake the lulav and you bring it to your heart. You know, when you shake the lulav, right, you do two things. You do this and you do this. So which is more important? The this or the this? It depends what kind of Jew you are. In most communities, the most important thing is this. Because the concept of shaking the lulav is to fend off bad winds that come from the east and bad winds that come from the west. Winds that can be destructive to the harvest. It's very practical, it's very down to earth. In Chabad, in Kabbalah, in Arizal, the important thing is that you bring it to your heart. Because you're taking the 6 directions and you're bringing them into your heart. The lulav represents the personalization of the sukkah. In the sukkah, there's one mitzvah, we're all sitting in the same mitzvah, and our differences are dissolved by the presence of the mitzvah itself. The lulav is bringing it to my heart. That's how it's understood. But it's a different concept. It's a different concept. It's a very, very different concept.
Wasn't the sukkah, the whole idea of the sukkah is that it represents the guiding hand of God
through the desert
with the cloud, which in turn was the sukkah.
Right.
Represented the sukkah.
Correct.
Therefore, in effect, the sukkah is more representative of what we're supposed to have. And the containment of us within the sukkah is the containment of us within God. The esrog and lulav still has to be bound together by outside forces and so on and so forth.
I really want to think about what you just said.
It's all right.
You have to buy the book.
Well, let me give you an example where the sukkah, the unity of the sukkah comes to play, okay? You can save the life of one man who's a brilliant scholar, a brain surgeon. Or you could save the life of 2 people who are ordinary. What do you do? What do you do? Huh? It depends if you're on the lulav side of the fence or the sukkah side of the fence. It's a serious question. Pardon me?
On the 2 people side of the fence.
How do you measure human beings? Do you measure human beings by their productivity? By what they can contribute to the civilization?
By their age.
How do we measure human beings?
Or is there an underlying measure of a human being which is so absolute, it's so immeasurable, that the simplest human being, ostensibly, on the deepest level, is equal to the most sophisticated and the most learned and the most scholarly? Because as you're saying, you cannot put a value on human life. If there's been an accident and you're suing in a court of law and the government is going to decide the financial value of a person, they're going to measure it by prospective years, by health, by age, and by productivity, which is really not measuring the value of the person.
As you said, it's inexactitude.
It's the functional measure of a person. You see, but this is what Sukkah speaks to that's not in the lulav. The sukkah is a different concept of unity. It's a concept of unity that says we're exactly the same. We're not different at all. There is a point, there is a heart, there is an essence where we're precisely the same. And the value of one is the value of another without any distinction. So 2 simple people have greater value than one giant. When you're identifying your being on the deepest, and you understand quite well that you and I sit in this comfortable sukkah and the weather is fair and it's not raining. So this is a wonderful philosophical question. But in the history of the world, the history of human beings, that question has been asked again and again and again in circumstances, in conditions where people had to go to the deepest place in their own neshama to try and find the correct answer. And this is the unity of the sukkah. The unity of the sukkah is different than the lulav. It's not focusing on what we contribute. It's not defining anybody by what they bring to the table, the best person or the worst person. It gets at the very essence of a person. We call it neshama, or in some context we call it yechida, the pinteliyid, the essence of what a person is, the essence of what a Jew is. You really can't measure one against the other. The sukkah speaks to this. The dalet, meaning the 4 kinds, speaks to the fact that unity is complex everybody is necessary and everybody contributes. And if you live in a community and you say, I can do without so and so, you fail to realize how poor you are because of your error in thinking you don't need Moshe or Chaim or Bracha or Bela or Basha or Chana or Bracha. We're very interdependent. But the Sukkah speaks about the inherent, the innate, the value of a Yid, the value of a human being that's so absolute. One is equal to the whole group is equal to one. You cannot measure at all. And in Jewish law, one of those strange laws, that if there's a community of Jews that are under siege, I'll let you speak in a moment, yeah? If there's a community of Jews that are under siege, that means that the walls are surrounded. I mean, today you can't have a siege anymore because of airplanes, but once upon a time you would lay a siege and you would surround the city, you'd cut off their food supply and their water supply and all the provisions, and you'd just starve them out. And it's a terrible condition, and the history of the world is filled with such events. And they say, we want one of you, and we're going to string them up. You give us one, the siege is over. And if you don't give us one, we're going to break the walls of the city and kill every single one of you. What's the law? The law is you're not allowed to give up one. You're not allowed. Now, somebody wants to volunteer, that's his business. Then it becomes a question, is he allowed to volunteer? But the community has not allowed to, one, in halachic terms, kol kavua k'mechza mechza. When something is fixed, one is equal to everybody. Everybody is one is everybody. So unless, if you have a member of that community who's a criminal, who deserves to be punished anyway, so then there is an exception made under certain conditions. But if they say, give us one or we'll kill you all, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to give one. Why? Because you can't value a Yid. You can't value a human life. This is the unity of the Sukkah. So Sukkah is an interface of two different ideas that really don't fit together so easy. You have to figure out how to bring them together. The Sukkah represents an idea. We were identifying the unity of the Jewish people by getting at the very essence, the very heart, the very pintel Yid. I have been very passionately involved in the 6-Day War. Last spring, we had the 50th anniversary of the 6th Day War. The 6th Day War happened, I was 2.5. I don't remember the 6th Day War. But I've heard a lot about the 6th Day War. I've read about the 6th Day War. And so I spent a whole summer reading. The Rebbe started the Tefillin campaign literally 2 days before the 6th Day War started. And a whole summer into the following winter, the Rebbe talked about the 6th Day War in very, very passionate and very, very encouraging tone. But he saw the 6th Day War as a very special moment. Now, I don't know. I mean, Norman is Norman's grandfather, so he has to be at least 39 plus 39. But besides, I don't know how old you are. I don't know, you're my age, older, younger, whatever the case is. None of us are spring chickens anymore, right? We're all either on top of the hill or on the opposite side going down. So if you're 60, you remember the 6th Day War. The way I've heard the 6th Day War described by my father was born in Moscow. My father lived through the war. He hasn't had an easy life. So he experiences things, challenge, tragedy in a real way. I heard this from secular people, from many different people, from a number of different people who passionately described. All of a sudden, every Jew in the world felt like every other Jew is his brother. In the period leading up to the war, even during the war, and shortly thereafter. Then we got into politics very quickly. But there was a period of time that went on for several weeks, maybe several months, where there was an experience of Jewish solidarity. The only word I have to describe it, based on how it's been described to me, that was holy. It was sacred. It was magical. Jews all over the world, religious, secular, Sephardim, Ashkenazim, you name it. There was a sense of Jewish unity that you could touch. During the Holocaust, we didn't have such unity. During the Holocaust, which was, how could you compare? During the Holocaust, Jews were busy politicking. But in the weeks and months leading up to the 6th Day War, and during those 6 days, there was such a sense of Jewish solidarity. Again, if you were older than I, you remember. I've heard this described. That moment was magical. It was extraordinary. It was so special. The Rebbe argued, when the Rebbe discussed it, so people were explaining it that this was the Jews' reaction to the Holocaust. We just had, literally, 20-some years ago, a Holocaust. 1 out of every 3 Jews were killed. And the fact is that the Jewish people who were not directly threatened by the Holocaust were apathetic. They didn't take it personally. So this was sort of a penitence. There was, Jews were not going to not care this time. This is how people have told it to me, that because of the Holocaust, Jews woke up and they said, we're not sleeping through this one. Because the 6-Day War was a 6-Day war.
Never again.
Pardon me, it could have been a bloodbath. It could have been so much worse than it was. It was a miracle. But the Rebbe, you know what the Rebbe said? The 6-Day War and the solidarity the Jews experienced at that time was God sounding the shofar of Mashiach. That's what the Rebbe said. And he used these words. I'm saying in English, but he spoke in Yiddish. God has sounded the shofar of Mashiach. He's waiting to see how we respond. The idea that people feel so connected, even though nothing on the outside shows a connection at all. That's the sukkah. That's not the lulav. It goes to the very deepest definition of a yid, the deepest point in the Yiddish neshama. So it's a different concept of unity. And in Sukkot, we bring the lulav into the sukkah. We're different. We're distinct. We're interdependent. We contribute different things. But at the base of it, there is something that you can't measure. The sukkah is something that the sukkah says that the value of every yid, of every human being, of every yid, is such that you can't measure it. You can't measure it at all. It's a different concept. On the deepest level of our souls, the sukkah idea resonates. On the subconscious levels. On the conscious levels of our souls, on the practical levels of our souls, on the daily levels of our function, the lulav idea of unity resonates. And ideally, you want to join them together. So, Sukkot is a holiday. It's a special time. It's a time with a certain kind of an energy, a holy energy, a special energy. And it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. It really is. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity. It's a challenge because all of us know how difficult it is for us to figure out how to get along, to farkuchen, you understand? To overlook, to not see, to not notice, to not make it into an issue. And on the other hand, if we have that wisdom, if we have that maturity, if we can overlook, there's a Jew whose name is Rabbi Shmuel Lu, should live and be well. He's a contemporary of my father's. He's around the young age of 80, around that age. He's a healthy Baruch Hashem, but listen, if I'm getting older, my parents are getting older too. Even Rabbi Shane's got a white beard at this point. We're almost the same age, a few years apart. So when yeshiva, I was a big buck and he was a little boy, and now we both have white beards. He has a bigger beard than I at this point. He's certainly a bigger rabbi than I am, a bigger chassid. So Rabbi Shmuel Lu tells the following story. There was, and he doesn't say a name. There was a rabbi in England who worked for what's called the United Synagogue. What the United Synagogue is, it's the umbrella organization of all the shuls in England. They don't have Reform, Conservative, Orthodox in England. They have United Synagogue. 90% of the Jews in England are not religious. But if they go to a shul, they go to United Synagogue. And officially they're Orthodox. They have a mechitza, they don't have a microphone. The rabbis are Orthodox, but the people who join these shuls are not necessarily religious people. So the standard is not particularly high, you understand? He was a rabbi who belonged, who was very important to the United Synagogue organization, and he had a disagreement with the Rebbe on an issue. I don't know what the issue was. I could speculate, but I don't know, and I don't want to speculate. And the issue that he had with the Rebbe created a very, very deep feeling of dissent. He had been a friend of the Rebbe's. He had visited the Rebbe many times. He had private audiences with the Rebbe. The Rebbe had collaborated with him on all kinds of projects in England. And now, because of an issue, a position that the Rebbe had taken, he was very disturbed. He felt like the position the Rebbe took undermined how he thought Jewish leadership should go. And it was a disappointment. A person, a very powerful man with a lot of influence, who had been a friend of the Rebbe's, now was angry. Really, he was not happy. So Rabbi Lu was in the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe asks him, what's going on with this rabbi? So Rabbi Lu says, the Rebbe knows what's going on, that the Rebbe took this position and he's not happy about it, and he's disenfranchised. He's distanced from Lubavitch. So the Rebbe says to Rabbi Lu, there are 613 commandments in the Torah. We disagree on one of them. There are 612 left. Go to him and say, let's collaborate, let's work together on the things we agree about. We have this disagreement, that's fine. Let's find common ground and work on the things that we can work on together without you giving up your position and me giving up my position. Why does the fact that we disagree have to become personal? So Rabbi Lu is standing in the Rebbe's room and he's feeling really bad. Why? Obviously he's a chassid. He has great respect, great reverence, great love for the Rebbe. And the idea that a person would be angry at the Rebbe to the extent that he's not going to help Lubavitch anymore was really disturbing him. And here the Rebbe says, listen, go tell him, you know what, it's okay, you can disagree with me, but let's work on those projects and those things where we agree. So Rabbi Lu says to himself, the story happened 40 years ago, so he was 40, he was half his age, is thinking, as he's standing in front of the Rebbe, how wise, how mature, how humble of the Rebbe to not return the hate with hate. He could have said, okay, you don't like me, I don't like you. You're not talking to me, I'm talking to you. And the Rebbe said, don't be silly. We have this disagreement, so we disagree. So we're not going to work on this project, but there's so many other things we can work on. So that was impressive enough. But Rabbi Lu was standing there in the Rebbe's room, as the Rebbe is explaining to him this whole idea of 613 mitzvahs versus 600. Rabbi Lu says, I'm going to go to this rabbi and I'm going to sit down with him and I'm going to make him see the Rebbe's point of view. This agreement has to end. And as he's thinking this, the Rebbe says, do not try to change his mind. The Rebbe read his thoughts. Do not try to change his mind. You don't have to. Let's find common ground. And this is a real serious message of Sukkot. We know it in our homes, with our children, with our extended family. The things that create separation between one person and another are so petty. And they create such terrible divisions. I'm saying it because I know it. I'm saying it because it's real. I'm saying it because it's important. You know how it works. Oh, I'm ready to love you as soon as you're ready to love me. And then you'll say, sure, I'll love you as soon as you're ready to love me. So who's going to be the first one to take that initial step? So both of you stand with one leg off the ground and wait for the guy to go down first. And that's how it stays. You have to work on the other, and you also have to look in the mirror. Take some personal responsibility. Just look at yourself and say, what can I do that will be positive? You wanted to say something before?
Roger, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was saying that, based on what you're saying, that the concept of the lulav and the concept of the sukkah both calls for a dissolution of the ego.
In different ways, right.
In different ways. In the concept of the lulav, the dissolution of the ego is for us to be humble enough to recognize our differences. And that we bring contribution and no one is more important than the other. And the concept of the Sukka is that we have no ego, so in so much that we recognize that we all are one and there's no difference between us.
Right, correct.
But you're saying that we bring the concept of the lulav
into the
Sukka. So where is the cohesion there?
They're really complementing each other. They're not.
I would say it this way: the sukkah comes first because it's simpler. The lulav comes second because it's more sophisticated. But the sukkah comes third because it's more complete. In other words, as a person, the easiest way to get along is to see no differences. A more complicated way to get along is to recognize differences and to contribute. The ultimate unity is that you recognize differences and you all contribute, but then you find the point where we're all the same. I mean, in Chassidus gets very, very deep. Chassidus would say you want to bring the sukkah into your lulav. You want that in the differences we should experience it, how we're all equal. these are deep ideas. They're serious ideas. Practically, we got a couple of steps before we have other issues besides figuring out how to create cohesion between the Sukkah and the Lulav. But the point is, this is what Sukkah is. The point is, this is a time that we can embrace, of an opportunity to prioritize, being grown up rather than being children. That's really what it comes down to. This is a terrible joke. It's a really, really bad joke. Should I tell it?
They're ready for the joke.
That was my way of warning you. Don't be offended. This couple comes to the rabbi, and they're tearing each other's hair out. They're going to kill each other. And they want a divorce. But they know that when you come to a rabbi, you want a divorce, the first thing the rabbi does is he stalls. He starts to give you go to this therapist, the other therapist. They wanted to convince the rabbi that in this particular case, there's no point in even trying. It's done. And the two of them agreed that they were going to present the rabbi a position that's going to say, this marriage has to end yesterday, and he's not going to, in any way, shape, or form, try to salvage the marriage. So the two of them come into the rabbi, and they're killing each other. And the rabbi says, she treats me like she's my mother, and she belittles me, and she puts me down, and she doesn't have any respect for me, and she doesn't have any value for anything that I believe in. And he says, my husband is a child, and a pig, and a slob, and they can't live with him, and Anyway, they convinced the rabbi that this marriage was not even going to try and save, so he immediately gets together a best din. Is to write a divorce, a legal divorce is much more complicated than writing a ksuba, and they do it. They have a divorce, finished. 9 months pass, and the couple comes back to the rabbi with their deed of divorce, and they tell the rabbi very sheepishly, with a significant sense of shame, we've been away. We've had an opportunity to think. We really want to give it another shot. We want to try again to salvage our marriage. Would you marry us? And the rabbi says, I don't get it. I've been in this business for 30 years. There's not a couple that's ever convinced me that I should agree to a divorce without trying to save the marriage, except for you. You convinced me. He's your mother. She's your mother, and she puts you down, and nothing you do is of value. And he's a pig, and he's a slob, and all the other things that she said about him. I don't get it. I don't understand. How will you guys even give it another shot? So she says, Rabbi, for both of us, it'll be a second marriage. For second marriages, we're okay for each other. Now, so that's a great joke, right? So let me tell you a story. I have, like Rabbi Shane, one of the trademarks of Chabad rabbis, they start out young. You don't become a rabbi at 35 or 40, you're a rabbi at 25. It's true. It's one of the secrets, it's one of the challenges of Lubavitch, and the secrets of Lubavitch is youth. So a guy grew up in Crown Heights. What does he know about life? It becomes a rabbi of a congregation. When you start out, most of the people in your shul are older than you. Eventually, you get a white beard. But you don't come out of the Chabad rabbi with a white beard. So he's a young Chabad upstart, and he's enjoying every new experience. To officiate at a wedding, to oversee a bris. But after a while, it's not all positive experiences. Some of the people you marry come to you 6, 7, 10, 12 years later, and they want to break the marriage, and it's very difficult. When you are involved with a family, they're like your children. It's very difficult. I don't know this experienced person. Describe the sadness of it all. And one of the things that he's learned is that people get divorced for the stupidest reasons. I mean, this joke about second marriage, what are you looking for? What? There's one thing that you're not going to get away from in the second marriage, and the third marriage, and the fourth marriage. That's who you are. And that's where most of the problems are. It's not the other person, it's you. And if you figure, if you have a second marriage first time around, you live happily ever after. In other words, if you go into it, no, it's true. If you go into it in a mature way, in a wise way, it's not about me, it's about us. It's not about seeing stars, it's about living together and creating together and accepting each other's faults and having your own faults accepted. So, and that's what the lulav and the sukkah are. You grow up, just be big, not little. Not say, I'll be good if you'll be good. Say, I'll be good first, because good is right. It's really important stuff. It's important stuff. But to talk about it is wonderful. To do it, that's another story.